last year when the pandemic began, most people started baking banana bread. I decided to start writing about my trauma. So Project Besharam came to me. It's something I wanted to write for a while. I'm originally born and raised in Bradford. I actually went to Brighton for university. I later learned it's the gay capital of the UK, which only helped me. And once I got there, I found that there were so many conversations that me and my South Asian friends were constantly having with one another. They were so similar, and we never had a place that documented our unique experiences. So it was really important for me that to start a community where at least we can help validate each other and talk about our experiences. Okay, so shame. So the first thing, in order to understand how to deal with shame, is to understand what it means. It's the feelings of sadness, embarrassment, and guilt in something that you think you've done is wrong. And it's such a subjective experience. People feel shame for different things, for different reasons. And I really wanted to sort of, from a South Asian lens, sort of explore it. But I know that a lot of what I'll talk about today, a lot of us can relate to, regardless of what background we come from. So the first thing I went back to was sort of our childhood experiences. You know, as kids, we sort of take in so much, and a lot of our understanding of LGBTQ plus issues start from watching our parents or watching people in our lives and how they respond to it. So I want you guys to just take a moment to just sort of think about where was the first time you heard words such as gay being used? How was LGBT plus issues responded to in your homes, and the first time it was used to describe you? So if you can just turn to the person next to you and sort of take a minute to just sort of share with them sort of when that began. Munasa, we know you're straight, but...
Sorry.
Listen to Zishan.
Lady woman, very sorry.
Yeah. Yes, are we ready to move on? Okay. Munas.
So sorry, sir.
Okay, so the origin of shame. So if whoever's comfortable to sort of talk, I want to try and categorize 4 things that I know I came across a lot when I was thinking of my reasons. So if anyone's willing to share sort of when they first heard the word or how they heard it being described or anything, that would be great. Yeah.
I think the first time I probably heard it was in like the negative connotation. So like someone would do something and they'd be like, oh, that's gay.
Right, and was that sort of in school and?
Yeah, I'd say it probably dates back to in the primary school.
So we often hear that among school kids, especially as boys, we tend to hear it being used as a synonym for weak, or we hear it being used as an insult to sort of demean someone. So our understanding of the word is so far away from what it actually was. Has anyone had any experiences related to their family? Sort of, I know for me, in my family, I very much, it's funny because a lot of what I've learned about my family is from seeing them watch TV and how they respond to things on TV. So whenever we had like, I don't know, a gay character on, there was just this instant like rush for the remote, like where is the remote? And you never find the remote when you need it. Have you noticed? Like, it's always when those moments come that you can't find the remote. But just seeing that sort of panic and hesitance of like, oh, you can't be watching this, that sort of really put into sort of in my mind that this is something that we don't talk about or we don't acknowledge. So I'm just going to show some of my examples. Media is another place. you know, very recently you started to get LGBT plus representation on TV, and while it's in its early stages, you will very rarely see someone that looks like me on television playing a gay character. Although things are definitely getting better, we're either shown to be the sad married man who has an affair, forced marriage, or we're shown in like the most, we're just shown in like very one-dimensional ways. Religion and faith, you know, coming from a very conservative Muslim community, being part of the group and not being excluded socially is such a huge pressure. It's not just about your family, you're part of a bigger community, it's the mosque you attend, it's the holidays you celebrate. So much of our life is based on sort of being part of this bigger group, and you want to fit in, and you know, it's very, not fitting in can be a big pressure for our parents as well. So a double life began. So that's when I went to Brighton for university. First of all, when I went to UCAS, I put in 5 universities, and my only condition was it had to be at least 3 hours away from home. I did not care what I was studying, I didn't care, you know, about the ratings, you know, how everyone was going through those ratings and I did not care. It needed to be 3 hours away, therefore my parents can't come unannounced. So I went all the way to Brighton. I typed in, you know, where's the gay capital of the UK? Brighton, here we are. And as I got there, I had this feeling that, oh, once I move to university, I can reinvent myself. If I dye my hair colour, if I start wearing some new clothes, if I reinvent myself, everything will go away. And very quickly I learned that these things were only going to get more complicated. Shame was an emotion that came up a lot during my 3 to 4 years at university, and it came up in different ways. Things that, for example, using dating apps. Living in Bradford, you go on these dating apps and you're met with all these blank faces, which sums up my dating life in most cases. But it's sort of this fear of being caught, or even if you know deep down you're not doing anything wrong, it's hard not to feel that way. That leads to you feeling secretive and vulnerable. Things like trying to experiment with my appearance, start trying makeup, new fashion. Anytime I had to come visit home or my parents were visiting my university flat, I was now hiding products everywhere. Literally 2 days before I would start getting this big black bag and just filling it in with all my MAC makeup and chucking it in my friends' rooms. And again, that makes you feel a bit inauthentic, and it makes you feel like, am I living as somebody who I'm not? New experiences like clubbing, you know, I come from a home where alcohol is forbidden, it's not even something that we're introduced to, and trying all these new experiences, trying not to get caught. I remember I had a friend who, we always have that one friend who loves to check in on Facebook and loves to tag us in the worst images, but we always look the worst in that picture as well. They pick the picture they look the best in. But anyways, so I remember one time one of my friends tagged me in something and I had to literally rush home, and I was like untagging myself from everything before anyone could see. And again, that just creates this feeling of feeling anxious and self-conscious all the time. So these are just some of the ways where sort of, on one hand, you're doing these amazing things for your growth, but at the same time, you feel like you're being held back in other ways. Stage 3, networks of shame. Oh boy, where do we start? Being part of the LGBTQ plus community is difficult. Then having to merge that with your British identity and being South Asian, and things can get a little bit tricky. Sometimes you feel like you can't fit into either group. Growing up in the West, you know, we have this European beauty standard, we have the standard of blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin, thin twinks, that I'm clearly not. It took me a while to realize that. There's also a lot of discrimination. I'm sure we've all come across Grindr profiles with things like no Asians or whatever it is, or just some strange way of saying that. There's also this pressure to come out. You know, and while coming out is so empowering for so many people, we have unique circumstances which make it a lot more difficult for us to do so. So therefore we start comparing ourselves to other people who've come out at a younger age. Simultaneously, while dealing with that, you also have the South Asian issues. You have this expectation from your parents. And being a gay man, it wasn't just about me liking men. It extended to this concept of the future that my parents had of me, which was to get married, to have children. It was like they were mourning the loss of a child, mourning the life of experiences they won't get. And it definitely creates a lot of pressure and a lot of guilt, you know, and the fear of being disowned and isolated, and most importantly, language barriers. You know, so many of our parents, especially who come from immigrant homes, our parents find it hard to articulate how they feel. So having to do that, you know, how can one set boundaries when they don't know what the word boundaries even means? You know, it's like talking to a wall, isn't it? So, you know, it's hard enough to do these things. So having, and I say that to say that all of this coexists, and it's very easy to fall into this loop of shame and feel like you don't belong anywhere. Lastly, the coming out expectation. Oh, okay. So when I came out to my parents at 21, so I'm 23 years old now, I came out 2 years ago to my mum and then a year ago to my dad. And I expected a party. Well, I didn't expect a party, but I thought it'd come round eventually, and I thought, okay, well, this is going to be a new season of change, you know, I'll find love. And this is kind of what we've come to see now in modern films and cinema. You know, we usually see this protagonist, which is usually white, and looks a certain way, falling in love. You meet everyone around him is suddenly quite supportive. They come out to the parents, you have the monologue from the parents, and it's the end. And and it's sort of, you know, Love Simon, not naming names, but very, very much Love Simon. But, you know, but on one hand, you know, I do acknowledge that it's amazing that we're even getting things like that, but I think we've got a long way to go in terms of understanding our journeys. And this is what coming out looks like for someone who's South Asian in our community. It is a web of a mess, because you do not come out once, you come out multiple times. And I think many of us, even who are not South Asian, have experienced that. Every time we walk into a room or a new space, or people start questioning, or people are curious, having to constantly come out to different people, whether it's your friends, your family, loss of identity. You know, I'm very much referred to as XYZ's gay son. Like, you know, you sort of lose the identity and you get defined by your sexuality, which on one hand you want to feel empowered by, but at the same time you feel like that's not all who I am. Dating and questioning your own spiritual beliefs, trying to know where you fit in, what you believe. And yeah, and one thing I really want to highlight is we have this expectation of South Asian families that parents respond in one aggressive way. When I came out to my mum, I was met with the silence. It was a very long silence, and it was not brought up again. And sometimes you kind of hope that they did react badly, because if they react badly, it means they actually process what you've said. But if it's left in silence, it's like there's no discussion on it further. And I thought, what have I done wrong? I've done what the movie said, I've done what Simon did. Like, come on, give me a break, Mum. But, you know, it is, to be serious, it is a very, very difficult thing. And I think what I really want to highlight is our journey with our sexuality is not linear, and that's okay. I know of people in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. I know of people who are working jobs, who are divorced. I know of people with kids who are rediscovering who they are. And the important thing is, through Project Besharam, I've learned that none of our journeys look exactly the same, and that's okay. It's never too late to rediscover who you are. It's never too late to start to unlearn some of the things we've been taught. And there's so many, just in life in general, there's so many benchmarks. You have to be this age to get married, you have to be this age to get a home, you have to be this age to get a good job. And we need to realize that we will do things in our own time, as long as we are patient with ourselves. And I just want to quote Brené Brown. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with her. I absolutely love her work. She is a psychologist, I believe, and a speaker for TED Talks. And she once said that shame cannot exist if empathy and understanding is in the room. And I truly believe that. Once we start to understand each other's stories, once we give ourselves spaces to speak, then shame cannot exist. Thank you for listening. And that's my Instagram if you want to follow it.